The Great Lakes State is known for many things. I'm sure the number one answer from any non-resident would be the auto industry, which of course would be 100% accurate. Henry Ford didn't invent the car, but he made up the assembly system we all know today, and I'm guessing just about every factory in the world uses it. I'm sure he didn't foresee robots replacing people on the line, but that's another story for another day. Let me say that I am indeed a lifelong Michigander. I have lived in both of our beautiful peninsulas. If anyone doesn't know, Michigan is two separate pieces of land connected by the Mackinac Bridge, classified as a peninsula, a body of land surrounded on at least three sides by water. Every resident of Michigan is no less than 3 miles away from some type of water, whether it be a pond, a stream, a creek, a river, a lake, etc. Michigan should be known for water just as much as the auto industry. The name of the state itself means big water, from the Ojibwa tribe. I would also like to make the rest of the world know that we should be the unofficial potato chip capital of the world. Try to get your hands on better made chips. I'll just leave that there. You know about the auto industry, you know about the Motor City, and you know there's a ton of water in this state. But what you might not know is that there are a plethora of scary, creepy, and unexplained myths and legends based in Michigan. During my time in the Upper Peninsula, I lived in the middle of the woods. Some people may like the exclusion to city life, some may like the quiet. That's all great. But man, I can't explain how unsettling that silence is some nights. I've heard a lot of bumps in the night up there. I always explained it away as being wild animals. It's hard to argue. You'd have a better chance of running into deer, bears, and even badgers on your way home than seeing an actual person. Wolves have been thriving up north too, and in the Lower Peninsula. This is where the story is going. I'm going to tell you about my encounter of the Dogman of Michigan, a myth going back to the 1800s in Michigan, in Wexford County, which is in the upper part of the Lower Peninsula. The creature has been described as being over 7 feet tall with piercing blue eyes. The creature is also described as wolf or dog-like, with the torso of a man. The creature has been seen standing on its hind legs, and the most horrifying feature is the wolfman's howl, which has been described as a human-like scream. It's unsettling to say the least. I bet if you looked around the internet, you would find that every state has some type of legend like this. After all, the horror world loves the werewolf story. It's been in pop culture for almost 100 years. But the Dogman of Michigan, it's not just a story, and it doesn't match any Hollywood script. The Dogman is no teen wolf, I can assure you. The other part of this legend is that the Dogman only comes out in 10-year cycles, more specifically years that end with 7. While doing my research, I thought this was just one of those details to make the story more fantastical, like how Stephen King's It character comes back to feed every 27 years, just an arbitrary number thrown in by some writer. But I had to stop when I thought back to seeing the creature. Sure enough, it was 1997, and I was about 14 years old. As mentioned, the legend most cryptid files are familiar with puts the Dogman of Michigan in the Lower Peninsula. My experience happened in the Upper, the UP as it's affectionately known. And before any genius in the comments says that I probably just saw a wolf or a feral dog, and let me stop you right there, Professor. You're going to read this whole story and say it anyway, but let me tell you, I have seen a handful of actual wolves in my life. Not many people have the privilege in real life when you think about it. They are coming dangerously close to being endangered in some areas, and where they do thrive are usually in real rural spots. And I lived in one of those areas. One moment stands out to me. Walking home on the dirt road, I saw it. I must have been zoning out, just wanting to lay down after walking miles home from school. Before I knew it, I was maybe 30 feet from a wolf that I would say was almost 100 pounds. I know some dogs can get to that size, but believe me, you would not mistake a wolf like this for a dog. Moving on. I'll say that growing up in the woods was like waiting for something disturbing to happen. It would be unnaturally quiet for days or weeks at a time. And then something would happen that not only caused the goosebumps, but maybe made you question what is really happening in your reality. One night while browsing the internet for one of the first times, I was maybe around 12. I saw and heard a car screech to a halt on the county road outside of our living room sliding door. Being that any kind of traffic was rare, this was alarming, especially at night. What I saw next is still burned into my memory. Two men jumped out. One threw a shovel at the other, seemingly forcing him to dig. The man with the shovel now in his hands looked at the apparent driver, with pleading sorrow in his eyes. I could see his facial expressions from where I was. Maybe I over-exaggerated them in my young mind, but I now know he was panicked. He was saying, "Please don't make me do this," without opening his mouth. The man who threw him the shovel went to the back of the truck, grabbing what looked like some kind of cloth or burlap sack. I swear to this day, it looked like it was the perfect size to hold a human head. The inferior man dug a quick, shallow grave. The alpha male threw the sack into the hole and forced his shovel man to bury it. Frozen in fear, I slowly regained my composure and called it a night. Quietly going to bed upstairs, like the now speeding away men would hear me move and come back to take me out as well. The next day, I cautiously made my way to where they buried their little secret. Nothing. Well, not nothing. There was nothing in the grave, but there were little footprints walking into the direction of the tree line, on our eastern property line. In the lead up to seeing the Dogman, a friend of mine and I were sleeping on our trampoline overnight. It was always a blast. Being that there wasn't a whole lot to do up in the UP, and the internet wasn't that much of an entertainment device at the time, which sounds ludicrous today. The trampoline was like the center of some families' homes back in the 90s. We would try to stay up all night, watching the pitch black sky, and counting the quadrillions of stars in the sky. We saw never-ending shooting stars. My buddy would name them after current-day NASCAR drivers. Number 2 was Rusty Wallace, 3 Dale of course, and number 24 Jeff Gordon, you get it. Neither one of us had a watch on, but when I heard a couple of 5-gallon buckets slam around near the chip pile, I guessed it was maybe 4 a.m. I based it on the constellations and the North Star. I was frozen in fear as my big German Shepherd Mal left his doghouse in a fury, barking and chasing off whatever made the ruckus near where my friend and I were sleeping. My buddy never budged. I just tried to ignore what happened and I forced myself back to sleep. It was probably an animal, no big deal. Waking up when the sun mercifully appeared, I sleepily eyed the immediate area of the trampoline. What I saw chilled me beyond words. What looked like human footprints were seen coming to where my friend and I were laying, and then heading to where the few 5-gallon buckets were strewn about 15 feet away. To be clear, it wasn't bare footprints. They looked like boots, and not my dad's. These were well above a size 13 or 14. I had bigger feet than my dad at that time, and I was a size 11 at about age 13. The thought of some creep walking towards us at night, it absolutely terrified me. Thank God for a dog. He got extra treats that day and I never told my buddy about what actually happened. That was a child's play compared to what happened when I saw the infamous Dogman of Michigan. I had no idea at the time what I was dealing with. My young brain wouldn't have been able to comprehend it anyway. It's still hard to comprehend it even as an adult. As a kid, I would venture to the woods often, sometimes with my younger brothers, sometimes with my friends, or sometimes just by myself. There's always an air of mystery when you're out in the middle of nowhere. The weirdest parts of the woods where I live are these abandoned little structures. And the best that I could come up with is that these were places for hunters or farmers. I never dared to go into these one-room, four-walled structures. They had serial killer vibes all over them. One night when I was out way too late was when I ran into the Wolfman. The sun had started to dip far too low below the trees. You can become much too disoriented quickly when the natural light was fading. I usually didn't have a flashlight with me, as I never stayed out past dark, and back then we didn't have cell phones. Hearing howling was not uncommon at all. Most time it could be easily attributed to a pack of coyotes. They would hunt sick animals or younger deer that strayed from their herd. But the howl that I heard was not from a simple coyote. This was a deep, man-like scream that pierced my ears. When I regained my composure, I saw that I was way too close to one of those freaky sheds in the woods. Slowly, I started to back away, in the direction that I hoped was my home. A loud crash echoed throughout the woods. Frozen again, like I was just months earlier laying on the trampoline, I saw a wide-eyed man fall out of the doorway. Even in the darkness, I could see the whites of his terrified eyes looking directly at me. He fell to the ground before locking his gaze onto me. He shakily reached an arm out towards me. I did nothing. I couldn't move. Before I knew what was happening, a beast burst through the door after this poor soul. This thing was standing on two legs. It had to have been over 7 feet tall. It was covered in gray fur. Its eyes were as yellow as the corn that we had on Thanksgiving dinner. In the blink of an eye, it clamped its ivory fangs into the man, dragging him back into the shack. Even though it was just past dusk, I could see shiny dark red erupt from his throat. All I can remember thinking was, run. In what felt like hours, I finally exploded out from the woods. With my house now in view, I fell to the ground. Attempting to catch my breath, I cautiously looked back toward the trees. Two big, yellow eyes glowed. I couldn't say for sure, but they looked like they were smiling. Keeping each other's glare for a moment, they slowly disappeared out into the darkness. Finally making it home, my parents asked where I had been. I just told them I was walking around the edge of the woods. It was really all that I could come up with at the time. It didn't matter though. My dad went back to reading the Farmer's Almanac, and my mom continued to watch Wheel of Fortune and then Jeopardy. They were both ignorant of the fact that I had just experienced the legend of the Dogman. I went to my room without saying anything else. The next day, I stared out into the woods. I imagined the man-like beast, tearing apart that poor man, limb from limb, taking its time and ripping a chunk out of his neck, disassembling and doing horrible things until nearly nothing resembled a human remained. The Dogman broke the forest, running towards me on all fours. It pounced, pinning me to the ground. It smelled like a dog, maybe rabid. It opened its impossibly big maw, drilling hot saliva onto my face. The last thing I saw was red, as it slowly consumed me and blinded my eyes. Waking up, gasping for air like I had been drowning, I shot up in my bed. I was drenched in sweat. Taking in my surroundings, I was more than relieved to see that I was in my bedroom. My Tyra Banks poster was facing me. My poster of Frank Thomas, The Big Hurt, was to my left. A huge breath escaped my lungs. My dad walked by my open door. "You okay, buddy? You went right to bed as soon as you came home last night." I made up some kind of just being tired kind of excuse. But I knew I would always keep this experience of meeting the Michigan Dogman to myself. Well, until now. If you are in the woods of northern Michigan, please be aware there are more than deer, bear, wolves, and dogs out there.